Thank you, Honor. Robert?
You know, I don't like the term cyber war either, but at the moment I'm hard-pressed to think of a better one. As Eleanor pointed out, there is obviously state-sponsored computer intrusion going on, you know, in the United States we have wars on drugs and wars on poverty, and it seems like the cyber war language is just alarmist and perhaps even distracts us from, you know, more clear and present dangers. When I think, you know, when I think about the topic of cyber war is very, very interesting, but it's rarely framed in the way that I'd like to see it framed. You know, I wonder about you know, warfare with like two armies going at it against each other, and what would happen, like what capabilities exist right now to, you know, as we, you know, increasingly have information system dependent, you know, tactical warfare, what, you know, what are the countermeasures to that, you know? And I think that if there ever is a real cyber war where two nations, you know, go at it and start deploying cyber weapons, I think it'll be, you know, it could be very much like you know, every other major war in the 20th century, where, you know, there will be somebody who will have some weapon that nobody thought of, or that will be, you know, devastating, and for a while it will totally knock the other opponent back, and then they'll develop countermeasures, because, you know, that's sort of one of the things that people don't talk about is we're pretty adept at developing countermeasures for attacks, and especially, you know, in IT, people are always are pretty good at scrambling and fixing things. So I don't know. I guess that's why I tend to think that the cyber war rhetoric is you know, overhyped, because there's sort of this idea of, you know, there being no water and chemical plants exploding and things like that, and it may be that for ordinary citizens, the consequences are things like the stock market doesn't work for a day, or I don't know, something like that.
Do you think that there are interests, I don't know if interests of the builders or the developers of those measures of protection, they want for that topic to be overstated, and the result is that it's actually overstated? Or do you think that really they are taking the right measures and the level of investment is the level that should be?
In terms of this sort of idea of cyber, this sort of apocalyptic vision of cyber war, we may not focus on the sort of obvious, right in front of our faces attacks, the Aurora things, the DDoS attacks, you know, email worms. I mean, basically everybody knows that pretty much every organization in the world has been owned at one point by a web-based drive-by. So why don't, you know, maybe we should deal with that.
And I would say that they have trouble getting good security people to work for the U.S. government. I mean, it's been a problem because the private companies pay so much. So often, you know, they get the funding, but it's not used wisely. And so I would argue that, you know, just getting the funding doesn't mean that things are going to be more secure, that we're going to, you know, protect ourselves more. Also, I would say that the use of the cyber war is kind of, I don't want to use the word offensive, but I don't like it, partially because it diminishes the real suffering that comes from real war and real violence, where people are dying and people have physical injuries. So I almost would argue that we need another term that's not so sensationalist, that won't repulse some people and you know, be used to, you know, for other agendas by others. I mean,
yeah,
I think
it's a metaphor from another time, and it's just, I don't know, it just doesn't seem to work as a metaphor.
Oh, but actually, I have to comment. I would argue Stuxnet is not espionage. I mean, it might have an espionage component, but there was a lot of sabotage, destroying or delaying the nuclear program. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, that's a fair comment.
Is that cyber war? Is that?
En todas las guerras hay intereses.
In every war, there is some interest behind it, either cyber war or cyber battles or cyber wars in the internet. There's always some interest. We also talk about war against terrorism. That's a term that was actually coined in the United States. And in that war against terrorism or terror, we don't see battles against the bunker where all terrorists lay. We see that they arrest someone, or they invade countries, or we see that they discover plans for probable or possible attacks. That is war against terror. So the term war, is it being well used there or not? And why is cyber war correct or incorrect? Because all of those operations have some sort of IT component or a cybernetic. In a fourth-generation war, such as the one where we find ourselves right now, where there are no great battles, where we will not see captains shouting at the troops for them to go towards victory, those are silent wars. They're aseptic wars. There are wars where we do see death, we do see suffering, but it doesn't reach us. We don't know about that. So we also have the topic of Stuxnet. I know it isn't, I don't consider it espionage or just espionage. I also think that it is the greatest cyber weapon that has been created that we know of. Because that's the thing, it is a weapon, but instead of being created by alloys, it's made out of bytes. But it is a weapon. And behind that weapon, there's the work that lies behind every weapon. Intelligence, in order to see what it is that we want to destroy and what's the best way to destroy that thing. There is engineering work. There is the work of those who have to build it and the work of those who have to fire it, because sometimes those who fire it are not the ones who designed it. So it's a weapon made out of bytes. And if we know that it is a weapon that was useful and worked and that created or caused a sabotage and won a battle in a war that is a silent war but an open war that is being led by Israel and the USA against Iran, then we can samples of that cyber war. Yes, Tema? Well, it might seem a bit absurd that that an army is not going to exploit some resource. It's actually a countersense. I have a colleague. I have a colleague who worked in cyber war. He worked in Sarajevo, and what he had to do was to take a look at antennas and capture radio signals. That's what he did. And in hacker conferences, there used to be a beautiful contest, Spot the Fed, which was discover the federal or the police officer. You simply had to, you know that there are hacking groups in the police and the army. I don't think that they are doing hacking. They are being instructed in hacking and coming to the conferences, etc. If they're not interested in. And as Ruben was saying, with regards to cyber war, we have to say that Stuxnet had 4 0 days. To have 1 0 day means that nobody knows it. What's not possible is to say that there isn't a cyber war because we don't know about this. That's 0 day, when we know that something has fallen, that something has been shut down, or if that means that they have been invading for 7 months different machines and controlling information and moving information, and that's when we discover that weapon is working. And in the case of Stuxnet, they discovered it because it was so violent that they needed a rootkit to control all the PLC of all the systems. So we're not talking about something silly. We're not talking about something that just a kid would do. It had already had 4 0 days. You either have to be very talented or have lots of money to buy all those 4 0 days in the black market. This is not something that anyone could do. We are in an environment where they are using that. Are we going to find out? Well, yes. We'll find out, because we sometimes find out about things that happen in, I don't know, in the government or in the royal palace.